I remember just a few things from World War II. What I remember was like a air raid drill. We had air raid drills where you had to, close your shades and put all of the lights out. The sirens were going. I remember one of those. I remember when President Roosevelt died. I remember when he died. There was great consternation when he passed away.
Yeah.
And that's all I personally remember about World War II was just the one air raid thing and the Franklin Roosevelt dying. Yes.
Yeah. My father is born in January of 1940, and he told me when he was still alive that he also remembered some small things because he was only 5 years old when the war ended. So
yes, that's true. That's what I remember. It's just a flash point, a bullet point or two, And it's interesting. I do remember, the Roswell crash occurred on July 2nd, 1947. Well, I remember distinctly July 4th, 1947. We had gone to the movies. When I had gone to the movies with my parents, and I was, on the way back, they bought me a little cap pistol, a little cap, a little cap pistol. So I went ahead of them and I went and sat on the front step of our house. I'm like 50 yards ahead of them. So I'm sitting there on the front step of our house, and these two fellows come walking down the street. They say, hey guy, what do you have there? I said, well, it's a cap pistol I got. He said, well, let me see that. And he took it and ran away.
No.
So, I remember that was July 4th, 1947. How about that?
Yeah.
2 days after the crash.
Yeah. So let's get into it. Roswell, nothing like Roswell, really, right? There's nothing like it, I would say. Wouldn't you agree?
As far as UFOs go, yes, for sure.
Yeah. No lights in the sky.
No lights in the sky. Oh boy, did you see that? Oh boy, look at that light. Oh man, that's great. Tell me more. Well, that's all I saw. It's not that.
No.
It's the best. It's the best case we have.
Yes,
it is the best. As far as interest, it's the best, and as far as the importance of it, it's the best because it's about a crash landing that had bodies.
Yeah.
There were bodies recovered and covered up. People were threatened with their lives if they talked about it.
Yeah. And the number of witnesses and the Mount Everest of information. There's no case like that, I think. Would you agree?
No case with, we have talked to over 600 people who had a little piece of the story.
Yeah.
And tell me another case that has that.
Which of your Roswell books would you recommend to someone that hasn't
all
read?
of them?
Yeah, but
I'll tell you.
For someone who hasn't read any books on Roswell, which one would you start with? Would you say?
Okay, I would start with this one. Witness to Roswell.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a classic.
This is the second edition. It came out in 2009.
Yeah.
But there's even better news, Tom, is that
this one
coming out. I'll get to that in a second. I'll get to that one in a second. Coming out in June of this year will be the third book, the third Witness to Roswell book.
Yeah.
It's for the 75th anniversary.
Yeah.
It's called Witness to Roswell. It's a third edition.
I'm going
the
to
other
get that
two
one.
will come out in June.
Yeah.
It'll come out in June. And that will be our last Roswell book.
Yeah. Okay.
That will be our last.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
Well, that's what my son says.
Yeah.
But unless something stupendous happens, like somebody comes forward with a piece of wreckage or a witness comes forward that we are unaware of, because all the witnesses that we were aware of are now dead.
Yeah.
The firsthand witnesses.
Yeah.
But that until the book you just held up, that had been our top seller and the best book in Roswell ever written. The one you're holding up now was the book that came out last year.
Yep.
Roswell, the Ultimate Cold Case Closed. We thought that would be our last book. We thought that would be our last book.
Almost closed.
And the feedback we're getting on that, Tom, is that that is the best Roswell book, not only that we have ever written, but that has ever been written. So you might want to hold that one up. Hold that one up again, because we are getting rave reviews on that. Came out last year, and the feedback we got, that's the best book on Roswell ever written.
Yeah,
so we'll
I really like it.
You know?
You nailed it. There's some chapters where you really hammer it down, because I really like the in the beginning you put it forward like a prosecutor would in a criminal law case.
Yes.
And that's the method, because I'm a police officer, a police detective. That's the no. I'm on leave now, so you're all right. I used to work serious crime, and then I got sick on sick leave, and I discovered ufology. Like never almost heard about it before, and then you know, using that method, that's what I was getting to. Using the method of criminal law with judging evidence and judging witnesses. If you have a method for that, like you're doing in your first 3 chapters, it's very clear.
I'll tell you this, Tom, is that a number of lawyers who have read our book have said that if we ever took the case to court, you know, a hypothetical case to court against either the U.S. Air Force or the U.S. government, it would be a slam dunk. We would win hands down, because the Air Force has nothing. They have nothing. We have over 500, 600 witnesses.
Yeah,
they have nothing.
They did do one good thing with their investigations, and that's
the
1997.
That was the 1997. 1997. They called it Roswell Case Closed. It was written by a lieutenant in the Air Force, and it came out right before the 50th anniversary celebration of the case.
Yeah.
See, this year it's the 75th anniversary. That's why we wrote the third book. Our publisher wanted it. We didn't go, oh, please let us write. They came to us, said, let's write another book for the 75th anniversary. Yeah. So it'll be out in June.
Yeah, but what they did do is that they helped eliminating the alternatives, the alternative solutions, the V2
they
rockets.
Did us a favor.
So there's only really
they did us a favor, because on our own, before they came out with their alternative solutions, we had examined all of those, like a captured German V2 rocket, an errant atomic bomb that got lost somewhere and landed in the desert, other things. So we had eliminated all of those originally. Well, the Air Force in the mid-90s, they did the same thing. They got it down. They eliminated everything else except this Project Mogul, this balloon contraption that they said was the cause of Roswell. They eliminated everything else for us.
Yeah, exactly.
So in reality, it came down to, was it Project Mogul or a crash UFO? It was one of those two. They did. Yeah. And the Project Mogul, when you look at it, it collapses like a cheap suit.
Absolutely.
It collapses like a cheap suit.
Yeah,
there's no way
we're going to get into that one because, but first I'd like to ask you a question, a hypothetical question. If you were given $1 million and you have to bet all of it on one UFO crash, or you can bet it on several UFO crashes, but you only get 1.5 times the money on Roswell, and you get 10 times the money back on any other UFO crash, how would you bet the $1 million?
Well, if I would be paid the 10, if I would be paid the 10 million, you know, I'd consider something just for the money, you know.
Yeah.
But there's only the number one case is Roswell.
Yeah. You wouldn't bet on any other.
No. There's see, because none of them, like take Rendlesham, the Rendlesham Forest in England. It's I think it has like 4 witnesses. No physical evidence. I mean, it was a landing. It wasn't a crash.
Well,
Rendlesham, there was a
it's not. I wouldn't count that as a UFO crash. So
right, that was not a UFO crash.
No.
In fact, right now, if you ask me, I'd have to think hard about another UFO crash, and I can't come up with one.
Well, there's the one in 65 in your home state in Pennsylvania.
Kecksburg?
Kecksburg, yeah.
Kecksburg, yeah. The main investigator for that case, his name is Stan Gordon. He lives out in Western Pennsylvania. He tells me, he says, one day, he says, I'll wake up and it was a crash of a UFO. He said, the next day I wake up, it was a Russian device of some sort, because of the funny writing on it.
Yeah.
So he goes back and forth. He can't make up his mind. And that's the only other one. Something did crash there or land.
Yeah.
It was like a big bell-shaped thing, acorn thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but the main investigator goes back and forth on it, whether it was a extraterrestrial or was it something the Russians had launched.
Yeah.
So that's not even close. That's not even close.
No. So you wouldn't bet
and I can't think of another one.
No, there's.
There was one in
Brazil,
one in 1953 maybe? In Kingman, Arizona.
Yeah.
That's been that's a single witness case. That's a single witness case. No, I'm getting that mixed up with Del Rio, Texas, which was a single witness case. Yeah. So you can't have like a single witness case, you know, for something like that.
Yeah. What is? Have you heard of Virginia? We're gonna hear
1940. Oh, you mean South America or Virginia?
Yeah, Virginia, Brazil, which James Fox is doing a documentary.
That one's been hanging around for a while.
Yeah.
That one's been hanging around for a while. I wouldn't bet on it, but it's been hanging around. Yeah. So, and being in South America, Brazil, I think it was.
Yep.
I'm not so sure about what comes out of there as far as
it was too much for me too. But listening to James Fox, he has found some. It seems to be good evidence, good witnesses, and so I didn't believe in it really when I first heard of it. But James Fox is working on it right now, and we're gonna know more about it.
You're talking about the Brazil?
Yeah, Virginia, Brazil, 1996.
I'll tell you the two best, in my opinion, my humble opinion, the two other best cases. They're both they're both alleged landings. One occurred in Westall, Australia, 1966.
Yep.
UFO landed at a school. So all the students come out, the teachers come out, the teacher's knocking on it, but that one's in Australia. I can't get down there, and I'm sure there's people working, but that's a good one. That's because there's so many witnesses.
Yeah. It doesn't count as a crash, I think, because there's no, it flew off.
Right, it's a landing. It's a landing. And the other one is Zimbabwe,
Yeah.
Africa, 1994.
4. Yeah. 4. Yeah.
Where you had, again, at a school, and they had students drawing pictures of it. And I don't think the school children were lying. I don't think they were lying.
Definitely
but
not.
they weren't. It wasn't a crash. It was a landing.
Yeah, exactly.
But as far as other crashes, I'm unaware of.
There's a couple. There's a couple, but there's they are really the amount of evidence is very small compared to Roswell. Yeah. So would you agree that the absolutely best argument against Roswell would be that we haven't had, it's not a established fact that UFOs crashes. It's not an accepted occurrence that UFO crashes. That's really the only good argument, that if we knew that UFO crashes, then it would be we would be pretty sure. Everybody would be sure of Roswell, I think.
Well, one did in 1947.
Yeah.
One did crash.
Yeah.
And it didn't crash. It actually blew apart. It blew apart. Now, the thing is, what caused it to blow apart? Why did it come from the planet Zos in another galaxy? Why did it come to Roswell to be blown apart? That's one of the arguments. And our answer is, we don't know why, but we know we know that it did happen.
Yeah.
And so it was either an internal explosion of some sort. Somebody pressed the wrong button. It was either that or something external, like a lightning strike, because it occurred during a severe lightning storm. And I've been in New Mexico in July. It's what they call their monsoon season, where the lightning is unbelievable. Unbelievable. And so those are our two suppositions, or two speculations: internal explosion of some sort, or a lightning strike. Some people say, well, it could have been radar. Well, we don't know. We don't, okay, if you want to.
That's pretty much fantasy, I think. But I like the theory about the gifting that is deliberate, a way for a non-human intelligence to present themselves in a vulnerable way. You don't like that? No.
Okay, Mork, we're going to send you to Earth. Well, you're going to have to blow yourself up. Okay, sir. I'm sorry. I just don't see that.
No, I think it's more. I think it's more like maybe they were already dead, or they weren't really alive beings. That they were kind of a.
There was one still alive.
Yeah.
There was one still alive that survived the explosion.
Yeah.
His or I should say its 4 comrades were killed.
Yeah.
And but one survived.
Yeah.
Now I'm sorry, that a way to announce yourself. I would think a better way to announce yourself would be to land on the White House lawn, or some conspicuous place like, here we are, rather than blow yourself up in a remote part of the New Mexican desert.
The
that
theory
doesn't work for me.
No, I think the theory is that it would be as less hostile as possible, presenting themselves in as a least hostile way. That's the reasoning behind it, I think. But who knows?
A less hostile way is to blow yourself up.
I don't know.
But yet one survived. So one survived. I'm sorry. I don't
no
buy that for a second.
No, I don't. I wouldn't bet on it either. What will you say that if Mogul is true, if it was Project Mogul, then Roswell would have to be explained by a like mass psychosis among 600 people. How that's not very likely that so many old timers would, under deathbeds, tell their loved ones bullshit stories, or that they have somehow that is not true, but they believe it's true. It doesn't. I mean, in one maybe in one case, but
some mass psychosis that affected at least 600 people that we talked to. Now, and the problem with that, the Project Mogul, is number one, it doesn't match the facts as we know the case. And the other thing is that the 509th Bomb Group in Roswell, this is the U.S. Air Force bomb squadron at Roswell, was the same bomb squadron that ended World War II in the Pacific by dropping 2 atomic bombs on Japan. They were the United States' most elite unit. Okay, they were created for one thing, and that's in time of war, drop the atomic bomb. The 509th is still in existence today, and its mission is still the same. In time of war, drop nuclear bombs. It's still in existence today. They don't like people to know that, but they are. But they're not flying B-29s like they did in 1947. They're flying the B-2 stealth bomber. So, but this unit, you're asking us to believe, not you, but the people that promote Project Mogul, and before that, the weather balloon story. You have to say that, well, these people in the 509th with their hands on the atomic trigger, they can't tell the difference between balsa wood and tinfoil and a spaceship from another planet. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want somebody that can't tell the difference between balsa wood and tinfoil and rubber and a spaceship. I don't want their hands on the atomic trigger.
That's a good point. And I think that if you take a look at Mac Brazel and Jesse Marcel went to radar school. He was a very
in Pennsylvania, yes. He went to intelligence school and radar. He knew everything that was in the air. He knew everything.
Exactly. And
he was the intelligence officer.
And Mac Brazel, he was born in 1898 or 99, right? Something like that.
In the late 1800s, yeah. He was 60. He died in 1963. I think he was like 61 or something. And
he I mean, those old timers living out in the wilderness back then, they really knew. Maybe he wasn't that educated in like university sciences, but they knew how to cut things with a knife. They know different materials. They were experts in dealing with materials and stuff. And he had found weather balloons before, right?
They had there was an old Spanish well on the Foster Ranch that he was the foreman of, and it was full. When we were there, when we first started, it was full of rubber balloons that had, because they were, you had all these military bases around. They put the balloons up, and some of them would land on his ranch, and so he was very familiar with the balloons that the military had launched, weather balloons. And he said they used to put them in this Spanish well, and it was full of these balloons that had crashed. So he would certainly be able to tell the difference between a balloon device and something else. And it was not a balloon or a mogul balloon.
Did Brazel didn't turn any of them in for a reward? Because there was a reward for weather balloons too, right? No,
not all of weather balloons. Weather balloons that they didn't turn in because they sent them up every day. They were expendable. But this Project Mogul was something else. It was something new, and there was instructions if it came down somewhere. there was instructions for the finder where to take it.
Yeah.
And so that was not what happened, because Brazel described this field about almost a mile long and 300 feet wide of small pieces of different types of aluminum type wreckage, small pieces. And it was not a rubber, it was not a rubber device.
No.
And the Project Mogul.
Yeah, and if the Raywin targets, if they were have coming down from a balloon height, right, they wouldn't suddenly crash and split up into a million pieces. They would be just
Correct.
lying on the ground.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Yes, because balloons, they don't like you say, they don't disintegrate like this ship disintegrated. Yes.
Yeah. What indicates that Brazel? How did it go about? Was Brazel out with the D. Proctor boy, and which site did he find first? You think?
The morning after the crash. This would be the morning of July 3rd, 1947. The neighbor boy, D. Proctor, 7 years old, he and Mac went out on horseback to check to see, because there was a big storm the night before, so they were checking fence and checking the sheep, and they got to the sheep's favorite pasture, which was just covered with this wreckage. The sheep wouldn't cross it, and he didn't like that, because on the other side of this pasture was the watering place where the sheep would go to water, but they wouldn't go across. They went a couple miles around it, because and for a couple of years afterwards they still wouldn't cross it.
Okay.
So it was something very very exotic that the sheep didn't like. And D. Proctor was with Mac when he found that stuff. Now, we tried for years to interview D. Proctor because his mother owned the ranch closest to the Brazel ranch. They were the closest neighbors. And every time he saw us coming, he'd go out the back door. We never did get to interview him. He was never interviewed by a professional or one of the investigators. Once in a while, to a friend, he would say something. Like the one friend, he said, "Oh, it was just a pile of junk." Try to figure that one out. But to another friend, he mentioned seeing a body or two. And we know that's true because we interviewed another fellow who was with later, a day or two later, was with D. Proctor, and they had gone to this site. It's called now the D. Proctor site, because we learned the story from his mother. And,
is that Loretta?
Yeah, Loretta Proctor, yes. Yeah, she lasted to almost 100. I mean, she only died recently. But we got the story from his mother, that on her, she was very sick. They didn't think she was going to make it. And this is like in 1993, 94. She had some sort of ailment, and they didn't think she was going to make it. So D. Proctor, he grabs her, he takes her out of bed, puts her in his pickup. He says, "Mom, I got to take you somewhere." So they drive across the desert. Here she is dying, and she's bouncing around in the pickup, and they pull up to this low little bluff. And so he says, "Mom, this is where Mac Brazel found something else." Now you figure that one out. It couldn't have been wreckage, because everybody knew about the records. That it's something else was one or two bodies that had been blown out when the ship exploded. They came down and landed on this low bluff. And we got the story that there were one or two bodies from a third party who was with the kids, and they and Brazel when he went back, when he found this site. They were with Brazel, D. Proctor, but this other boy said, and when we interviewed, he was like 70. He said there were 2 bodies there, 2 little bodies.
There is an interview with a anonymous person that calls himself D. I found on internet. I think it's supposed to be D. Proctor, but have you seen that? Is it
No.
really D. Proctor? He doesn't show his face, but maybe you would recognize his voice. I don't know. You haven't seen that?
I've got like 600 witnesses going around. I don't know which one what was he talking about?
He was mostly talking about that he couldn't tell what he knew because he couldn't get loans. People couldn't get loans if they were talking about the Roswell incident. And he doesn't really go into any interesting details, but and he doesn't show his face, but he's called himself D, and I think it's supposed to be D. Proctor, but it doesn't really matter because he doesn't say anything interesting.
Well, D. Proctor became an alcoholic, morbidly obese, and he passed away somewhere in I don't know, 2006, something like that, 2006. But he was an alcoholic and morbidly obese, and I don't know this. If he calls himself D, that the only D I know is Timothy D. Proctor in the Roswell case. So maybe it was, but I'm not familiar with what the interview you're talking about.
It's from some old TV documentary, but it doesn't really make any difference. So if we go back to Marcel, well, Brazel turns it into Sheriff Wilcox, and then Marcel arrives at Sheriff Wilcox's office. And then, have I understood it correctly that Marcel brings one of the boxes back to Roswell Army Airfield, and
Yes.
one box is left at the sheriff's office?
Correct.
Yes. Okay. So then Blanchard must have had some of the material from Sunday, and the newspaper, the announcement is on Tuesday. So Blanchard had that stuff for 2 days.
Well, what they did, of course, when he received the box of material from Marcel, he was sufficiently interested by what this was in, by the wreckage that he was seeing and handling, that he called his next higher command, which was General Ramey, and certainly General Ramey called Washington. So Washington said, get some of that material to us as soon as possible. So a plane took off the same day Brazel brought it to town, and July 6th. A plane was already heading to Washington with some of that wreckage. So they got it the same day Brazel came to town.
Yeah.
And Blanchard, I'm sure he kept some of it, but he sent most of the box to Washington.
Yeah.
And he also instructed, I'm sure on orders from Washington, get Marcel and whoever he wants to take with him out, follow the rancher out to the ranch and see what that stuff is. Because their concern was not extraterrestrials. Their concern was it Russian? That was their main concern. Was it Russian?
Yeah.
So Marcel and Sheridan Cavett, the counterintelligence officer on the base, followed Brazel out to the ranch on the same day that Brazel brought it to town, that stuff. So they went out there. It was late in the evening when they got there. So they stayed overnight at the Hines house, which is a little bunk house 1 mile from the debris field site. So they stayed overnight and actually got to the site, the pasture, the next day, which was July 7th. And that's when they finally got to the sheep pasture with all this wreckage.
Yeah. Had Brazel hauled a big piece of material to the Hines house? Is that that's in Carl
That's
Flock's
what he said.
book. Yeah. Do you think that's
what he
true?
said. Yeah, why would why would he make up a story? He said he hauled two of the bigger pieces of the wreckage. Most of it were these little palm size, palm of your hand. Most of them was that, but there were a couple larger pieces. He said he dragged them by horseback to the right next to the Hines house. There was a little cattle shed. It's they're actually, both of those structures are gone now. The cattle shed was gone. I mean, when I got there in '93, the cattle shed was still there, but by '95, the cattle shed was gone, and only in the last 2 years, the Hines house has been gone. And but I fortunately I take pictures of everything, so I got a lot of pictures. But the larger material was stored in not the Hines house, but in the cattle shed that was next to the Hines house.
Yeah. So what do you think about the plan that Washington or Dubose and Ramey and those guys made up? Was it really deliberate to first tell the world that they had a flying saucer, and they were planning to take it back? Is that the way you think it was planned?
This is the only thing that Don Schmidt and I disagree about.
Okay.
I think it was I think it was a local mistake. The story was given to the base public information officer Walter Hout by Colonel Blanchard, that they had found a crashed flying saucer. Put that out to the 4 media outlets in Roswell, 2 newspapers, 2 radio stations. I think it was a local mistake. Why else would Washington be so upset if it was something they wanted to plant first and then take it away the next day to make everybody feel silly? Why would they be mad at Blanchard? They were mad at Blanchard. How could you put that story? So this is what my co-author Don Schmidt and I, he believes it was all orchestrated from Washington. Put this story out, and then we'll take it away. And
it's very bold.
That doesn't work.
It's very bold to do something like that. But has it been done? Is that a method that's been used before that we know of?
I can't think of something like that.
Right.
I can't. But that's the other alternative, that it was all orchestrated. Put the story out. We know by that time they knew there were bodies because they had discovered them at the impact site, the other site. So put out this story, but don't mention bodies, and then we'll take it away with this weather balloon story. Now, if they had used something other than a weather balloon, like a crash of a new fighter jet, that was under test, something, a rocket, V2 test, something like that, it would have been more believable. But a weather balloon, it was just so far fetched that the people at Roswell would misidentify a weather balloon as a spaceship. That's a bridge too far. Yeah. That's a bridge too far. Yeah. I think it was a local mistake, Tom, but my co-author thinks it was all orchestrated from Washington. So I don't know what else to tell you.
Yeah, and our namesake, Dubose, he what did he say? Did he say that it was kind of planned, or?
Yeah, he said he got a call. This is like after the crash story went out, right? The crash story goes out on the afternoon of July 8th. Tuesday, July 8th. It goes out for the late afternoon and evening newspapers. The other newspapers the following day, the crash story goes out. So Dubose, who's in Fort Worth, Texas, Carswell Air Force Base. He's General Ramey's deputy chief. He's the second in command there, Colonel Thomas J. Dubose. He gets a call from his next higher command, which is Strategic Air Command.
McMullen?
Colonel McMullen,
Yeah.
yes, General McMullen. What are you guys doing? What did you do? You get a story out there to get the press off Ramey's back, because they were getting phone calls from all over the world.
Yeah.
No doubt even Sweden was calling. And maybe it was your father. No, I don't know.
Probably not.
They were getting calls were coming from all over the world to the base. And so McMullen calls, he was calling Ramey, but Ramey wasn't there. So Dubose took the call and they said, get the press off of Ramey's back. I don't care how you do it, but do it. So that's where they came up. They came up with this weather balloon story. It was something really quickly done. I would have used some other story other than a weather balloon. But that's what they did.
It was kind
Dubose
of
confessed. Dubose confessed to us that the story was bogus. It was put together on the orders from Washington to get the press to get off the story.
Yeah, I don't know how they got away with it. Well, they didn't really get away with it because we're still talking about it, but they kind of got away with it.
Well, it killed the story in the press.
Yeah.
It killed the story in the press. And the other two things they had to kill was they had to have the airmen, the people who on the base, the Roswell base, who knew about this because the story went around the base. So they held meetings, big meetings in the hangars there. Okay, you guys, if you want to keep talking about this, if you want to learn more about it, you can read all about it in Leavenworth Prison, which is the military federal prison. So that killed the story on the base.
Yeah.
Now, what about the civilians? What they did with the civilians is with Mac Brazel, they threatened him not with death, but they threatened that they would put him in an insane asylum, a mental institution, if he talked about it.
Yeah.
Don't you ever talk about it? We'll put you in a mental institution.
Yeah.
Okay. The precedent for that, I can tell you, came from the Pearl Harbor cover-up from 1941. There was a key witness there to the reception of a teletype translation that was the key to alert all the Japanese embassies that they were going to go to war with the United States. And this interpreter, he was a naval commander named Alwyn Kramer. He said, yes, I remember seeing that message. I remember seeing. They put him in a mental institution until he changed his story.
Oh wow! They put
him in a mental.
Frank Joyce. Did they put him in a mental?
There's you're getting it. You're reading my mind here.
Sorry.
They threatened Mac Brazel with putting him in a mental institution. They did put Frank Joyce, the KGFL announcer, who was broadcasting, they said, you got to stop covering this story. He says, who are you? I'm a civilian. You can't do anything to me. I'll see what we can do to you. They put him in a mental institution in Texas for a full year.
Yeah, that's awful.
He never got a diagnosis what was wrong with him. But after a year, the story had died down. They released him and he never went back to Roswell until he's buried there. He's buried in the cemetery there. Yeah. But that's the precedent. They did it with Mac Brazel. They threatened him, but Joyce, who was rebellious, they said, you can't shut me up. I'm a civilian. You can't tell me what to do. You'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
And they arrested him and put him in a mental institution.
Yeah, how did because Mac Brazel and Sheriff Wilcox, their lives was kind of destroyed by that, wouldn't you say? But how did Frank Joyce do
Uh,
after it?
Frank Joyce, he kept quiet about it. He never said anything after he got out of prison, mental institution, for 20 years. He never said it. He said, I never spoke about it for 20 years. Then he started talking in bits and pieces about it. And when we went down there, when Don Schmidt and I teamed up to keep the investigation going in 1998, our first stop was down in Roswell was with Frank Joyce. And he said, look, fellas, I'm going to tell you something. Everything I've said to date, I always said there was more to the story that he couldn't talk about. But I'm going to tell you two fellows right now, the rest of the story, don't stop me because I might realize what I'm doing. So once I start, don't stop me from talking. And so I grabbed the pencil, and he told us about that when Brazel came in to the office, the KGFL, with the cover-up story, that it was a weather balloon, that the Air Force had grabbed him, took him to the base, kept him in the guest house until they got him to change his story from what he saw to a weather balloon story.
Yeah.
So Brazel goes to KGFL, and he tells Joyce the weather balloon story. So Frank Joyce says, well, wait a minute here. What about the bodies you told me about the day you called, from the sheriff's office? What about the bodies? And the terms that Joyce used with us in 1998 was, what about the little green men? And Brazel turns around and says, well, they weren't green.
Yeah.
And out he goes.
Yeah.
So
because they had they had recorded a long interview with him, hadn't they?
A wire recording.
Yeah.
And I have a picture of a wire recorder in one of our books, and I don't know how it records, but it was a wire recording. And they before the military got a hold of Brazel, KGF got a hold of him. They drove out to the ranch and grabbed him because they wanted to get a scoop. They wanted to get a scoop for the media, and so he stayed at the publisher's house, Walt Whitmore. He stayed at Whitmore's house overnight. They had done a wire recording of his story, and they were going to release it, and they never did get to release it because the military stopped them.
Yeah.
And they grabbed all of the teletype messages. They grabbed the wire recorder and all of that stuff.
Yeah, they cleaned a lot of things up. That's for sure. Who did Brazel tell about the bodies? He told Frank Joyce and Whitmore. Did he tell any other people about the bodies?
Yes. And he told his granddaughter, Fawn Fritz, his granddaughter, Bill Brazel Jr. We call him Junior. He wasn't a junior, but Bill Brazel's son, his daughter. And this was like in 2002. We were doing a archaeological dig out at the site, and we interviewed Fawn Fritz, his granddaughter, and we asked her, did Mac ever mention bodies to you? And she said, yes, he did. And she said she had asked him, well, Granddad, did you see any bodies or anything? And he said, yes, I did. And she said, well, what were they like? And he said, nothing you would ever want to see. He said they were nothing you'd ever want to see. So I'm not going to describe them for you.
Yeah.
There was he said something else about them. I can't remember right now off the top of my head. It was basically it was bad, nothing anybody would want to see.
Yeah.
So she confirmed he talked about bodies. He saw bodies.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a private citizen out there with any possession of any material, piece of material?
I'm
Do
sorry.
you think there's pieces of material in the possession of private citizens out there still?
Absolutely,
I think so. Yeah.
absolutely. And the reason I say that is because the Corona ranchers, it was just a habit of them. Whenever there was like a plane crash, and there were plane crashes out in the desert. The civilians, the Corona civilian ranchers would be the first. It would be like a family get together. They'd all go out to the crash site first to see if they could help anybody, and secondly to pick up souvenirs from the crash. And it was no different this time.
Yeah.
Something crashed, out they go, kids and everybody.
Yeah.
And so there's no doubt in my mind that there are pieces of wreckage in the possession of some Corona ranchers as we speak. And one of those, we've heard from several people that he has a couple pieces. We've approached him several times. We know him well. He's denied it. We don't believe him.
Okay.
Because too many people have told us separately that he talked about having a piece of the wreckage.
Have they seen it, or have it just?
Yeah. Well, no. They just said that this fellow, and I'm not going to mention his name.
No, I understand.
That he told them that there's been a piece in the family ever since the crash.
Can you tell us a bit about the person that contacted you and gave you a picture of a piece, right?
Now, what you're talking about, a fellow from Lawrence Livermore, which was a national laboratory, one of the U.S. national laboratories. I get an email from him out of the blue. And he says, I was working at Lawrence Livermore some years ago when they dropped this strange metal on my desk. They said, figure out what this stuff is. Well, it was the classic memory metal. We talk about the metal that you can hold up, that they recovered from Roswell, empty, and it just floats there. And it floats there, and it, instead of dropping to the ground, it just floats there. The memory metal. We call it our holy grail of Roswell.
Yeah.
Because when we get a piece of that, we got everything. We got everything. You don't have to send it out to a laboratory that you'll never hear from again. You can just put it on television. Okay, folks, here we got a piece of memory metal. Watch this.
Yeah.
Let it go, and it just floats there without a crease. You can't cut it, burn it, do anything.
But you have a picture of that.
Yes. And so what he did, I said, okay, let me see the picture. Well, the size of a test tube, a chemical. It was a little piece about this big, just a little piece in a test tube. And so for the life, you couldn't tell what it really was.
No.
So I never used it.
What do you think about it? Do you think it's the memory metal or just bullshit?
There's no way that he says it is. The scientist says it is.
How does he know?
Said, because he worked on it.
Yeah.
He worked at Lawrence Livermore.
Yeah.
And it was his job to try to figure out what this stuff was. And they finally told him, well, it was from Roswell. And so somehow he got a piece of it that was this big. And he said, here's what I have, but don't ever mention my name. And that's a red flag, right? And the other red flag was that we didn't find him, he found us. Whenever that happens to us, when somebody says, here I am, I got a story for you. 99 times out of 100, it's phony. So that was the red flag. And number two, it was such a small piece, you couldn't tell nothing other than his word that it was a piece of the Roswell records,
Yeah,
but
okay.
you can't use his name.
No.
So we never did
So
anything
not
with
much
it.
to go on. Okay, so let's go to Roger Ramey. He said to some, who did he tell that Roswell was the biggest lie he ever had to tell? Was that to his wife? Or?
Yes. No. Oh, yes. We have two confessions. One from his wife,
Yeah.
through a friend of hers. We got it from the friend of General Ramey's wife. He was on his deathbed in 1963. And she kept the secret all the years. And so she asked him, dear, what was Roswell really was it really a weather balloon? He said, no, it was a spaceship. That was what he told her. It was a spaceship.
Yeah.
So she tells her friend, from whom we got the story.
Yeah.
That what I just told you, that it was not a weather balloon. On his deathbed, he said it was a spaceship.
Yeah.
The other confession was a fellow, I can't remember his first name. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name right now. Like I said, I got 600 names going around. But he was a airman in Fort Worth, Texas. And so he's on the flight line with the rest of his crew. He was a sergeant. And they were waiting for a plane to taxi up for their flight. And General Ramey comes out, and the crew is standing there waiting for this plane. And so one of the officers said, hey, General, and this is like 1948, a year after the Roswell crash. Hey, General, what was that stuff that happened in Roswell last year? He said, well, I'll tell you, it was the biggest lie the Air Force ever made me tell. He said, it was the biggest lie. It was, the strangest thing I ever saw. It was the strangest thing I ever saw. And it was the biggest lie the Air Force ever made me tell, the weather balloon story. Yeah. And he said, it's not from this earth, fellow. It wasn't from this earth.
Yeah. So really all the key military have some way or another confirmed the Roswell story. Ramey, Blanchard, Walter Haut, and
Marcel.
All of them have really.
What's his name? Edwin Easley.
Yeah, DuBose, Exxon. Oh.
All of them, yeah.
Yeah. And that should, I mean, you can't just pretend like that's not a factor. All of them, most of them have confirmed the story.
Both Ramey and the provost marshal. I just said his name.
Yeah, not Exxon, but
Edwin Easley.
Yeah.
Edwin Easley. Both were deathbed confessions. Both of those were deathbed confessions.
Yeah.
DuBose was not a deathbed confession, but he was very old at the time he told us. He died within a year. And so we consider them all deathbed confessions, you know. Yeah. So,
do you think that the Air Force did a good job or not covering it up? Because they made some, they kind of made some mistakes, right? Like promoting Blanchard the way they did. That's kind of telling.
Well, Blanchard, and we got this from one of his favorite pilot, a fellow named Woody Swancutt. He said Blanchard at first thought it was Russian, but then it turned out not to be Russian. And then he got a call from Ramey, who's told Blanchard that Ramey would take over. And he said Blanchard looked relieved that Ramey was taking over. So Blanchard, other than the original press release, he's out of it. He's out of it. Ramey took over the case. Blanchard was Blanchard had one thing on his mind, his eyes on the prize. You ever hear the term, keep your eye on the prize? His prize was to be promoted all the way up to be chief of staff.
Yeah.
And he got to second, and his next step when he died would have been chief of staff. So even he confessed that it was a spaceship with bodies to somebody else that we interviewed. But as far as the Air Force knew, it was Ramey had the ball. General Ramey had the ball. Blanchard was out of it as soon as Ramey took over.
Yeah. What do you make of the Shirley Wright story and the Einstein being involved in the Roswell case?
Yes, that's more recent. I got the story maybe 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And I finally gave up on it because it didn't lead me anywhere, because the source that I was given was a phony name. She had a phony name for whoever Einstein's secretary was. It was Einstein's secretary who we ultimately got the information from, or one of our assistants named Anthony Bergalia.
Yeah.
He lives in Florida. He got the story. He is an intrepid, indefatigable researcher. He never gives up. And he got beyond where I left off, because I gave up on the story because all I had was a phony name for the secretary. Somehow he got the name from a MUFON investigator in Florida that he knew. And she led him to the real assistant. She was either an assistant or a secretary to Einstein, who we got the story was from.
Yeah.
And according to her, Einstein was called to Roswell. He was gone for a couple of days at this time.
Yeah.
And it turns out that Einstein was there. He saw everything, but he, according to his secretary, he wasn't particularly interested in it, because he's a deep thinker with all this stuff I don't understand, with the cosmos and E equals MC squared and all that stuff goes right over my head. Well, that's what he was interested in. He didn't care so much about what he saw. He was basically not interested. He did see everything. He was there. He's gone for like a week, and but he was not particularly interested.
No. So do you think that because she sounds very believable in the interview, this Shirley Wright, and it's very logical that they would, if they had something that exotic, non-human crash, they would. I mean, how many other rocket scientists that were involved. So it sounds very logical, but. So do you believe it? Do you believe that the Shirley Wright story?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Do you think it's I should bother with the information coming from Frank Kaufman or Eli Benjamin or Gerald Anderson?
Cross Kaufman off your list.
Yeah,
just
completely.
Dump him in the waste.
Yeah.
Dump him in the wastebasket.
Nothing interesting from him, is it? No.
Well, nothing true. Nothing true.
Nothing. Okay. Yeah.
Just wad him up and toss him in the trash can.
Yeah. Gerald Anderson.
Gerald Anderson, waste casket.
Yeah.
Waste basket material.
Yeah.
We spent 2 years on him.
Yeah.
We spent 2 years on him. He was phony from start to finish.
Yeah.
Okay, but we wasted 2 years on him.
What about Eli Benjamin?
Real name Elazar Benavides. It's all in our new book. He would not let us use his real name. His real name is Elazar Benavides. But in Witness to Roswell, we identified him as Eli Benjamin to get his story in there. He is the last surviving witness that we know of. There may be others, out there that we don't know of, we don't know. But of the ones that we know and interviewed, he is the last survivor. And the last we heard was that he has Alzheimer's, or dementia, and he was in a nursing home in Albuquerque. But I believe he may be gone by now. He may be gone.
Yeah.
But his story was he was a good story. He has a son living in Roswell, you know, so you can just look up Benavides, so you'll get his son. But we basically got all that he had to give to us. We got that. He's in our books.
Yeah. Okay. To June Crane, do you know who the pilot named Clarence that she talks about is?
We never. Clarence is a first name. I mean, without a last name. I mean,
okay.
What are you going to do? Look up all the Clarences?
Yeah.
It's a no.
Okay.
No, we never. Impossible. Impossible.
Well, if you haven't figured
in fact,
it out,
I looked in fact, I did look in my. I have a base yearbook from the base, Roswell Army Airfield, and I did look for all the. I did try to find a Clarence. I couldn't find a sergeant. I think he was a sergeant, but I couldn't find a sergeant named Clarence.
Can you straighten out the situation with all the archaeologists? You know, C. Bertrand Schultz and W. Curry Holden and Barney Barnett.
I got in. That's how I became involved in the investigation of the case rather than just reading about it, because I do have an MA in anthropology and archaeology. I'm a physical anthropologist by training, and a couple of years of PhD work at Toronto. That's how I got involved in the Roswell case. Is the second site north of town. This is not the debris field site on the Brazil Ranch, but the impact site just north of Roswell, where the rest of the ship that didn't explode came to rest, and where they found 2 dead and 1 alive. That was discovered by a group of archaeologists. And according to the first book, The Roswell Incident, 1980, they were from the University of Pennsylvania. Well, they weren't. They were from Texas Tech in Lubbock, Texas, same town as Buddy Holly. Texas Tech in Lubbock, and a fellow named William Curry Holden was the leader of the group. And we found him alive in the early 90s, and he was like 94, very frail. And Kevin Randall, who was still part of our team back then, interviewed him in person in Lubbock. And Kevin kept asking him in different manners about the Roswell crash, and to every time Holden would answer, "I was there. I saw everything. I saw it all. I was there." He wouldn't describe things, but when Kevin said, "Okay, about this, did you see it?" He would say, "I was there and I saw everything." We were going to do a video interview of him shortly after, but he passed away shortly after that. So he led the group.
Yeah.
That
is that called the Plains of Saint Augustine? Is that the place? No.
That's bogus.
Yeah.
When I got involved, the Plains of Saint Augustine was in the original Roswell incident story.
Yeah.
The 1980 book. They didn't have they didn't have see, they interviewed the Brazil family, they interviewed Marcel, and none of those at the time had bodies. We're talking about bodies. The only story they had about a body being found, or bodies, was a story told by an agricultural, a federal agricultural guy who lived in Socorro, New Mexico, 150 miles west of Roswell. And he talked about, and he didn't give a date to this, but we think it was like 1950, but somehow Friedman and William Moore incorporated that story into their 1947 Roswell crash because the agricultural specialist was named Barney Barnett. Barney Barnett told about seeing a crash flying saucer out on the plains of San Augustine. So Barney Barnett told of coming home from a trip out to western New Mexico, heading back to Socorro on Highway 60. He saw a flash of light out in the desert. And so he goes out to investigate. He thought it was a downed plane or something. And here he describes this flying saucer with bodies, alien bodies hanging out. And he must have given a number of how many, but there were a few. But it was just like the Roswell story. He said he was there looking at this, and he got real close to one of them, looking at it, and up comes this group of archaeologists. And this is where they said he thought they were from the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And a group of archaeologists come in and they're looking around, and then here comes the military. So it was just like the Roswell story, right? Mm. So they incorporated it into the Roswell story, the 1980 book. Mm. Now, Barnett died of throat cancer, and he apparently, according to everybody, he was a straight shooter, straight arrow guy, never fibbed or anything. He said that he thought he got the throat cancer from getting too close to one of the dead aliens and breathing the essence of it, and he thought that's where he got the throat cancer. But you have this story. He's the only witness. Yeah. He's the only witness to this alleged story.
So there's nothing to that story, or
there's nothing that we can prove to it. Okay. No, because he's the only first-hand witness. He was long gone before we ever. Yeah, we got the story from people he told it to.
But the plains of San Augustine and the Barney Barnett story, that's also the trash can, right?
Barney Barnett, there's nowhere to go with that story.
No.
If it's true, if the story is true, it didn't happen in 1947 because he started telling the story in 1950, and he told it to his boss. His name was Fleck Danley. When he got back to the office, and Danley said he heard he said, "Oh, you're full of it. Get out of here. Don't ever mention that to me again." And that was in 1950, according to Fleck Danley. So, and the way we interpret it is that he, after he saw all this and was run off by the military, he went back to the office and told Fleck Danley about it. And Danley didn't want to hear anymore, and he never talked about it again.
Finally, let's go to our favorite embalmer, Glenn Dennis. So he's kind of
You're picking all the good ones.
Yeah, but the first part of his story, right? It's about him getting the call from the Roswell Army Airfield about he's supposed to get coffins, child-sized coffins, and questions about how you conserve a body. And as I understand it, that is corroborated by two other witnesses that he actually talked about.
Yes.
Yeah.
At the time it happened. Yeah. One was a police officer. His last name was Hall, I believe. The second one was a judge who we interviewed years later. Well, we interviewed the policeman too, but years later, we interviewed the judge in his office. By that time, the judge was in his 80s. He said, yes, I was good friends with Glenn Dennis, and he did tell, he was talking about these strange phone calls, plural, that he was getting from the base for child-sized caskets, and the best way to preserve tissue that had been out in the desert. Yeah. And so there's no doubt that he received the phone calls. Yeah. The other part of his story we're not so sure of, where he claims to have been apparently the Ballard Funeral Home also had the contract ambulance service.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know about you. If I'm injured in an automobile accident or something, I don't want to be taken to the hospital in a hearse.
No, a 22-year-old Glenn Dennis.
That's not a good sign. If you're going to the hospital, you're already in a black hearse.
Yeah.
So
you're
but
gonna
that's what he
wind
said.
up. You're gonna end up at the funeral home in one way or another.
Yes. So we're not sure about that part of his story. In fact, I believe he got the hospital's part of the story. There was a fellow embalmer there, and I discovered this serendipitously by accident.
Yeah, I heard you tell that story, and I think that story is very, because there's three stories, right? There's the story of what Glenn told us, and there's the story that you found, which is probably the way he found out about the information, and there's this story of how you got the information about how he got the information. It's very confusing.
Yes,
yeah.
It was pure luck. In addition to having a yearbook from the base in 1947, I also have a photocopy of the 1947 Roswell City Directory. Okay, and in the directory, it not only has the person's name, but it has their job, what job they do, or where they work.
Yeah.
Well, I was looking for a nurse, the nurse that was called to the base, and wherever I saw a person, a woman's name with next to it, it said nurse. I would say, oh, okay, well, wonder what that is. Well, I found a nurse who had worked at the this big clinic in Roswell, Marshall and Marshall Clinic. It's now called the Lovelace Clinic, but back then it was Marshall and Marshall Clinic. She was a nurse at this big clinic in Roswell. So I said, I got to find out more about her. Well, I learned her husband's name was Juanita Brown, Brown. No way you're going to find, there's 90 gazillion Browns in the United States, So somewhere along the line, I came across, so I looked up Brown, and there was this fellow, Winifred Brown. It said, embalmer at Ballard's Funeral Home. This is what Glenn Dennis was. He was an embalmer at Ballard Funeral Home. And so he was the husband of the nurse.
Yeah.
Juanita Brown. He was the husband of Juanita Brown. So I did some more research, and yes, she was called. Someone else said, oh yeah, I remember that story. She was called out to the base hospital with her boss, and we got the name of the doctor. And that's when when the bodies were brought in, they called this doctor to go out to the hospital, and he worked at Marshall and Marshall. And so they go out, they see the bodies and all that. And so she comes home, tells it to her husband, Winifred Brown, who tells it to Glenn Dennis.
Yes.
That's what I believe happened.
Yeah.
That's what I believe happened.
So then Glenn probably, do you think that he wanted to tell that story, but he didn't want to expose who he got the information from, so he made up
he gave us a phony name.
Yeah. So the whole part about
Naomi,
him picking up that injured airman, that's just that's bullshit, right?
That's made that up.
Yeah.
Made that up.
Yeah.
Yes, we believe that part, the second part of the story, he got from Winifred Brown, whose wife was the nurse that went out to the hospital.
Yeah, and he was never at Roswell Army. He didn't drive out to the Roswell Army airfield, did he? Glenn Dennis?
Not in that instance.
No.
In that instance. No. That's what we believe. That's what we believe. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds very plausible. That
But this was all serendipity. This was like you have an epiphany. You're searching for something, and all of a sudden it clicks. There it is.
So he was truthful about
he got the phone calls.
Yeah. And then he got the story from his colleague who had the wife who was actually involved, and he wanted a way to tell that story, so he made up the story about getting to the hospital.
Yes. That's what I believe. Yes. We also got the name of the doctor who was in the city directory from 47. His son of the same name is also a doctor now practicing.
Mm-hmm.
And I questioned the son. Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, we know that's another long story, but the son got the story from the father, doctor. So when I interviewed the son, I said, well, we have this person who identified your father as being called out to the base. Well, no, we were in 1947. We hadn't arrived in Roswell yet. I said, sir, I'm looking at the 1947 city directory, the data of which was gathered in 1946, and there's your father's name. He says, oh, well, there. All I heard was crickets. I heard crickets, a lot of crickets. They said, well, I'll have to do some more research on that. Goodbye.
He didn't want to talk about it.
He did not want to talk about it.
So, what have you got going now? What's still going on in the Roswell case?
Well, we thought we had a movie, because this is the 75th anniversary year. And the producer director Ron Howard had approached us. And so the company that has the option for our Witness to Roswell book met with Ron Howard 3 times. So we thought, boy, this is it. I can get that house up in the mountains that I'm looking for, but it fell through. It fell through. And so we're now looking at a mini series for this year, and I'm going to knock on wood on that. I hope we get something comes out of it. But as far as future Roswell research, the only thing we're missing is a piece of physical evidence. And I know there's a piece out there somewhere. And however it arrives into the public domain for viewing, I'll accept, but that's the only thing we're missing. As far as I know, all of the first-hand witnesses are dead.
I'm hopeful, Tom. I think that the momentum that has been the last couple of years is going to finally get U.S. Air Force to first closed hearings. If we get the U.S. Air Force to closed hearings, then it's going to be a one-way street down to the Roswell answers.
It'll be a one-way street. That $1.5 million you were talking about, I wouldn't bet it on that.
Did you see the TV series that came out like a year ago or 2 years ago, maybe? Roswell: The Final Verdict, where they used that AI.
Yeah, I was in that.
Yeah, you were.
Was in that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you were. Of course.
They were here at the house. For 4 hours.
Yeah. What did you think about the?
No, I have not seen it.
You haven't seen it? Okay.
It's on this Discovery Plus channel. I don't have that.
Okay, because we're talking about this series where they use the AI measuring facial expressions and giving verdicts if they were telling the truth or lying, right? That's the
that was my idea. That was my idea.
Was it your idea? Oh.
Yes.
Very good idea.
I would
say that the TV series, it was too modern for my taste. The fast pace and the special effects. I don't like the.
I haven't seen it. we think Roswell, as far as the proactive out there, I think we have another archaeological dig scheduled for this year at the impact site.
Oh, really?
And we have the big 75th anniversary coming up in July down in Roswell, where I will be a speaker like every year down there. And but as far as the case itself, I don't know what more we could do. In my mind, we solved the case. We just don't have a physical piece of evidence. We've had people who were skeptics until they read one of our books. And after they finish reading our book, Witness to Roswell or one of the others, they totally turn around and say, I hate to use the term believer, because that's like, oh, he's obsessed, or something like that. But they come to a different place after reading one of our books.
And the tape, the Merrick toy store, they were blaming this tape made in New York City, and you looked it up.
That was ridiculous.
There was not even a toy store. Yeah.
That was ridiculous. They said that the symbols on the tape bled off onto. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, but some people believe that, because if you take a fast glance at it, maybe you can't be sure, because in the other, then you have to believe that it was a non-human UFO crash, and that's a bit too much. So it's easier to cling to this small, maybe it was a tin foil. So it's hard for people to. It's hard to.
But people are more accepting today than they were back in years past. With all of the television and the movies, and the advances in rocketry and space travel and stuff, they are more accepting today of the concept of other life in the universe.
Yeah.
But most of the people, a lot of people in the science that are in the public eye, the divide comes when you ask, well, do you ever think they have visited Earth? They'll say, oh, yes, we believe there's life in the universe out there somewhere, but no, that we don't think they've ever visited Earth. That's where the big divide comes.
Yeah. I don't know where you are on the extra dimensional hypotheses and this stuff. Are you?
I have a story about that, because Don Schmidt and I, our mandate was to get and interview as many witnesses as we could before they died. That was our mandate. And we never did talk about, we're often asked the question, well, where do you think they're from? And why did they come here? And, geez, we never really talked about those things. But recently, I just assumed, well, it was, there's 100 million other galaxies out there. We're just one galaxy. There's 100 million galaxies, each with billions of stars, most of which have planets. So do the math, the number's about that long, how many exoplanets, planets there are. But we had never talked about where we think they're from. But two of the recent witnesses, and I say within the last 5 years, have given who they were, have given me pause to think in a certain way. One of them was the son of Ernst Steinhoff, who was one of the paperclip Germans who came over after World War II. He was a rocket scientist. He was involved in the United States rocket program, developing guided missiles. He was also involved in the Roswell case of analysis as to what it was and other UFOs. His son said, oh, by the way, Roswell wasn't extraterrestrial. I said, what do you mean? He said it was extra dimensional. Now, where would he have gotten that from? His father. who's in the New Mexico Hall of Fame for rocketry or something like that. He got it from his father, who was heavily involved in Roswell and UFOs. And he said it wasn't extraterrestrial, it was extra dimensional. Well, the second person I'm talking about was another. He was a naval commander who was in Werner von Braun's group. He has been called the father of American space satellite technology. The father of American space satellite technology. Pretty smart guy. He was also involved in Roswell and in Werner von Braun's group. And he was interviewed by a fellow researcher named William Burns, Bill Burns. He used to have a show, UFO Hunter or something like that. And he interviewed George Hoover was the fellow's name. Commander George Hoover is a naval officer in von Braun's group. He's pictured with him. And Burns interviewed him, and Hoover said Roswell was a crash of something from somewhere else. It was a crash of something from somewhere else. Well, where was that? He said it was not extraterrestrial. It was extra temporal. Extra temporal, i.e., time travelers. And he even went so far as to say they could be us from a future Earth. And this is, coming from Uncle Harry, you're not gonna pay any attention to that. But coming from the father of American space satellite technology, George Hoover, and coming from Ernst Steinhoff, the rocket scientist, heavily involved on all that research, time travelers, it gives me pause to think.
But what do they base that on? What concrete reason do they have to say that?
That was just their conclusion. That was just their conclusion from
but
all
is
the
it a
research.
wild guess? Is it a
But
wild guess?
They were involved in they were involved. I don't know what was the key to unlock that answer. They're both. Steinhoff was dead, and I got it from his son. And Hoover was dead, but I got it from Bill Burns. But what the key was, I don't know. If you're investigating all that stuff, and you both come to the same conclusion that they were time travelers, I don't know what was the key. I don't know. But that's what they said. They were time travelers.
At what time what year did they say this?
I interviewed Steinhoff's son about 5 years ago.
Oh, okay.
And I'll have to, next time I see Bill Burns, I'll ask him what was the epiphany moment that Hoover had that led him to conclude that it was time traveling.
Yeah, maybe they've read Jack Vallée and other.
Since then,
authors.
I've been trying to read up on some of this, universe and bending space, and it's like right over my. I mean, it goes right over my head. It just.
I'm trying to listen to a physicist, the world's best physicist, and as far as I understand, the multi-dimensional hypothesis, it solves some theoretical problems, but no one has ever seen anything
it's
more.
Over my head. Whatever it is, it's over my head.
Well, what the basic...
I'm just reporting. I'm just reporting to you as a reporter what was said by people who were in the eye of the hurricane. They were in the eye of the hurricane. That's what they said.
Yeah, but I'm reporting.
It took me by surprise.
I'm reporting to you that as far as the physicists that I've listened to, nobody has ever seen anything else than 3 spatial dimensions and time. So there's nothing concrete that differentiates that from pure fantasy, really. It's a good theoretical solution for some physical problems in string theory and stuff, but nobody has ever observed anything more.
I'll have to ask Bill Burns, because these 2 guys, they were involved in Roswell. They had the wreckage, they had the bodies. What caused them to come to this conclusion? I don't know.
No,
I don't know.
Do you know the physicist Kevin Knuth?
Kevin who?
Knuth. Kevin Knuth. No,
I do not.
He's also in ufology. He's in the SCU, the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. So he's also quite well into UFO topic, and he's a renowned physicist at what university is it? I forget what university, but he, being a physicist and knowing a lot about UFOs, he has said that he doesn't really care about the hyperdimensional or extra dimensional hypotheses. So, well, I don't know. It doesn't really matter, but it's fun to talk about sometimes. But
well, if I can find out from Bill Burns what was the that moment that caused them, what was it?
Yeah,
because they were, the bodies were in their corporeal state, their physical state, and as was the ship. So how do you know? I look, I'm not a physicist. I'm trained in anthropology, not physics. So that's, to be honest with you, that sort of stuff bores me.
Okay.
Because it goes right over it just bores me to death.
Yeah.
And I just passed along to you what was told to me by 2 people who were involved in the Roswell case and the Roswell analysis and research. That's all.
Well, you've been very generous with your time, Tom. I have to thank you very much for coming on and speaking to me for this long. It's been very interesting, and I might get back to you on some questions later on. I have a couple of Swedish articles from 47. They're not very interesting, but
Couple of what?
A couple of articles from Swedish press from the summer 47. They basically say,
does any involved Roswell? Do any mention Roswell?
Yeah, one of them at least do, but it's
I would be interested. Yeah, I would be interested in that.
Yeah, but it's basically the press release in Swedish, or parts of it.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, when I read the Roswell incident book in 1980, it just blew me away, and I'm not really, like I said the West Australia case is interesting. The Zimbabwe case is interesting. Rendlesham is fairly interesting.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much it.
Do you know about the ghost rockets in Scandinavia, of course, in 46?
Yes.
Yeah. But did you know that a ghost rocket crashed right in front of the Swedish commander-in-chief in 1948?
No.
That's pretty. His name was Helge Jung. He was a general, and he was the highest.
Did they identify where it came from?
No, and then they never found anything of the ghost rockets. They in 1946 they saw there were 1,000 reports, more than 1,000 reports in Sweden alone.
Yeah, I think the USA sent General Jimmy Doolittle over to investigate those.
Yeah,
and I don't know what he said, but they were ghost rockets, and where they came from, I don't know if they ever found that out. I don't know.
No, not that we know of. But the interesting part here is that the active commander-in-chief, the highest-ranking Swedish military, General Helge Jung, 2 years after the ghost rockets in 46, he was sitting at his cabin in the east of Stockholm, and a ghost rocket comes in front of him, and it goes around and crashes in the lake that's just in front of him. And so he rows out. It's 18 meters deep, so he can't see anything. He then starts a search by radar, and they start diving at the lake. And we have no reason to believe that the Swedish military ever found anything from the ghost rockets. Then, in 2 months later, there's this American document, top secret document from 48, where the US Air Force was visiting Sweden, and they were told this story, but the Swedes didn't confess who this guy was. They didn't say that it was the commander-in-chief. They called him a technical expert. And that document is really interesting. If you haven't read it, I'll send it to you, because the Swedes are telling about this technical expert, which have seen a ghost rocket landing or crashing right in front of him. And then in this American document, they say that the Swedish military thinks that these ghost rockets, or they actually call them flying saucers in that American document, but that the Swedish military have come to the conclusion that it must be from some other civilization, not from this earth. That was their conclusion in 1948.
Wow.
It's a great document.
Yeah, I remember the case. I remember somewhere along the line, somebody claimed they were Russian, but it wasn't convincing.
No.
But
No.
All these years, I just figured, it was a very interesting episode, the Ghost Rockets, 1946. And Jimmy Doolittle was a 4-star general, famous American general, and they sent him over.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what I don't know what Doolittle ever said about it. Now that you mention it, what his conclusion was, if he had any, I don't know.
Mm.
So I just assumed that all these years they've been still unknown.
So he visited Sweden concerning the ghost rockets.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yes.
It might have been him.
And right in 1948, we in the U.S. we had the green fireballs. They called them the green fireballs. In New Mexico, they would come down and explode, and they never found out what those were. They had this Dr. Lincoln La Paz, who was involved in Roswell. They hired La Paz to try to figure out the trajectory and the speed of the Roswell crash object. But in 1946, they had this green fireball thing. They come down in New Mexico, and they would explode, but they never left anything, and they never did figure out what they were.
No. And in 1948, they had the Kapustin Yar incident in Russia too. So it's
the 1948.
Yeah, Kapustin Yar. Supposedly the Russians shot down a UFO.
Wow,
and I'm thinking that's a really short time span from Roswell in summer of 47, and then next summer a ghost rocket crashes in front of the highest ranking military in Sweden, and in 48 also there's the Russians shooting down a UFO, supposedly. I'm not sure that is true, but I'm sure that the Swedish part is true. That is very well documented.
Yeah.
So that's kind of goes along the lines of the seeding theory, but you don't like that one.
With the what?
The seeding theory, that is deliberate, giving us technology.
Oh.
No, don't go
that's
there.
A bridge too. That's a bridge too far for me.
Oh.
I'm a nuts and bolts guy. I'm a nuts and bolts guy.
Yeah.
I'm out of my element when they start talking about where they're from, or why they're here. It's all speculation. So
yeah,
but
definitely.
that's not my forte. My forte is concluding based on facts. So it's like in every book. In every book, we have a prelude. Sergeant Joe Friday from the LA Police Department in the famous show Dragnet, his famous saying whenever he would interview a witness was, "We just want the facts, ma'am, just the facts." And then the anthropologist, the father of American anthropology, who was a German, by the way, named Franz Boas, his philosophy was gather enough evidence or data and the answer will fall to you like a ripe fruit. Gather enough data or evidence and the answer will fall to you like a ripe fruit. Yeah. So that's what our motto, at least mine is.
Yeah. Do you like the rule, the KISS rule, KISS, keep it simple, stupid?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And Occam's razor. We also follow Occam's razor.
Yeah, I
the
think
simplest answer.
Yeah, Occam's razor. I think that says that it's aliens from another planet. It's simple as that. That's Occam's razor.
I'm not ruling it. I'm not ruling that out. I'm just in fact, I never thought of time travels because it's way above my knowledge base. When I interviewed these two people very close together, I said, "Oh my goodness, this is new to me." But considering who they were, I had to give it some extra special weight.
Yeah, I think that it's just humans being confused the first time they're meeting another civilization from another planet. Of course, it's going to be confusing. That's my take on it. I might be wrong, but nobody's ever proven time traveling.
Well, I
tried.
I've tried to read up on what space time. It's like for me, it's like I just don't know what to. It turns out I'm just not interested in that stuff.
No. Well, we have Hal Puthoff,
bending space, and that's way out of my range. That's way out of my range. Yeah. So I'll let others do that.
Yeah.
All I know is they did crash. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah.
From somewhere else. They did crash from somewhere else.
Definitely somewhere else. Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I think the simplest explanation is that life evolves on other planets. It has to be the simplest explanation.
Well, it evolved somehow, and whether the seeding came from meteors or meteorites, it got here somehow.
Yeah,
and here we are.
Yeah. Have you heard the talk about human DNA? And have you followed the discussions? Luis Elizondo and this former CIA officer, John Ramirez, and a meeting that took place some decades ago, a CIA meeting, which they talked about Roswell. Well, they were talking about a non-human crash of some sort back in the 40s. And they were talking about human DNA, and that they believe that our DNA is somehow the same or made. Our DNA has something to do with the crashed.
Believe it or not, I am mildly interested in DNA as it involves human evolution.
Mm-hmm.
But these stories about they came in UFOs and they altered the DNA somehow to produce us. That's too much for me. I'm not interested in that stuff.
It would explain a couple of things. It would explain why we look like them. Maybe it would explain why we are evolution has taken some jumps, right? Like 50,000 years ago, all of a sudden we were cooking food and making tools or making arts and stuff. And we haven't found that missing link really. So it's a viable theory still, I think.
Well, I took a human paleontology class last year just to sort of refurbish my physical anthropology, and the fossil evidence to me is compelling. Of they have the split, the split from the most the closest relative is the chimpanzee, of course. They have the split, the so-called missing link split, 6.7 million years ago. They got it down to that, and they've got the different fossil evidence for that. And to me, as a trained physical anthropologist, I of course find that compelling.
Yeah.
And any other explanation.
Yes,
but because you can see.
Yeah, but you're the guy to ask what happened 50,000 years ago, where our frontal lobes all of a sudden developed.
Yep.
Really fast.
Frontal lobes. You look at some of the fossils. The frontal lobes aren't there, but Homo sapiens differentiates itself with the skull. The frontal lobes become larger.
Yeah,
and they think that's because of the dependence on culture, or what I mean. But you're dealing with fossils with gaps of thousands, if early on millions of years. So, but to me, I that's where I'm trained. That's what my interest is.
Yeah.
And the difference between, say, the skull of a Homo sapiens and a Neanderthal is the Neanderthal doesn't have those, doesn't have that frontal lobe development. Same with Homo erectus, the next stage below Neanderthal. They're human from the neck down, but up here they got these skull, the big brows and the bun in the back, but no big frontal lobe development, which is a more recent development.
Yeah.
So then you say, okay, then what's the reason for that? And the only reason is usually something cultural development, society and stuff like that. I don't know, but that's what they say.
Yeah. But there's also this really important gene that we haven't found the answer where it comes from. It has to do with early fetal development of the brain, and it hasn't come from our ancestors, and it hasn't come from, it seems to just have popped up. I don't remember the name of the gene. I think I have it written down somewhere. But this gene that the Neanderthals and the Denisovans didn't have them, and we don't know where it came from, but it seems to make a big difference in brain development.
Yeah, you'll get a how should I say it? You'll get different recombinations or different combinations of genes, and something that comes along that's advantageous to fertility, and you get more of those. That's how those things happen, as far as a geneticist would say it, is that during the recombination of the genetic material, certain things, most things are deleterious, but some things are not, and they are advantageous. But most genetic mutations or recombinations are deleterious and don't last, but some things do. And that's how they would explain it. Yeah. I'm not a geneticist, but I just know genetics from an overview. I'm not really into genetics, but that's how they would explain it.
Yeah. Have you heard any good theories on that it after the military got involved in Roswell, could they have found out something about the beings, the non-humans, that was so earth-shaking or important that they had to really put the kibosh, really clamp down on it. What could that be?
That's one of the theories. That's one of the theories.
Yeah.
Is that whatever it is, it's so earth shaking, let's say, or so people will not like it that they just don't want anything to get out because it was so bad, or something negative as opposed to something positive. And that's one of the theories.
Yeah. Perhaps that
I think Don Schmidt believes that. He believes that. Yes.
Well, it kind of rhymes with if they actually have something to do with our development. That maybe they were so religious back then. If they were really religious and thought that
they were more religious back then they are now.
Yeah.
More religious. Yes.
Yeah.
Religion, religiosity in this country is taking a deep negative turn.
Yeah.
Since say 50 years ago.
Yeah. And I think maybe you're not so optimistic, but I'm pretty optimistic that in maybe 2 or 3 president terms, we are going to get a lot of more answers if we keep the political pressure up. But I don't. You don't see that happening. But
see, they were all excited when Obama became president. Oh, he's going to release him. Oh, he never did. He never did. And Trump, I believe he knows, but when his son asked him, "What about Roswell?" he said, "Well, I've heard some interesting things about that." And his son said, "Well, do you believe in UFOs?" He goes, "Not particularly." What kind of answer is that?
Yeah.
Not particularly. Was that?
I think he actually confuses Roswell and Area 51, because if you if you listen to that answer again, and it sounds like he doesn't know the difference between Roswell and Area 51. So
that's possible. That's possible.
Yeah.
Harry Reid certainly did. Harry Reid certainly did.
Yeah.
But I had the same I had the same impression. Like, does he know we're talking about Roswell? And he just said he heard some interesting things about Roswell, and there was some other question, and maybe he maybe did get confused. I know he didn't want to talk about it. Neither did Bill Clinton, who does have at least one of our books. He has the Witness to Roswell book.
Yeah,
it was given to him personally by the guy that wrote the foreword to it, and the guy who produced the movie Roswell. And we know he was given a copy. We think Hillary read the book, but we don't think Bill did.
Yeah,
because Bill always goes, "I don't know. I'd like to know, but I don't know." But Hillary has stated that she believes we have been visited.
Yeah.
Well, she has said that.
Have you seen the WikiLeaks emails between Podesta and Tom DeLonge and McCasland, the former chief of the because there was something going on there. The WikiLeaks, there were contacts between General McCasland, who was the chief of the science lab in Ohio, right, Patterson Air Force Base, the Air Artillery Command. What's it called these days?
Yes. And Battelle Memorial Institute was up the road.
Yeah, so it's pretty clear. I mean, most ufologists that I listen to or also think that there was some kind of disclosure project being planned, and it was all about Hillary winning. And so they had this email conversations leaked with Podesta, McCasland, and Tom DeLonge, and they were going to make a TV series. And they had probably a big plan for disclosure once Hillary had won the election. But the problem was that Trump won the election. So their big plan kind of took a dive, and they
I did not know that. Yeah.
yeah, and they kind of made an ad hoc solution. Elizondo quitting ATIP and going to the New York Times. They had something else planned, that's pretty sure, but I'm not sure what it was.
Yeah, all of the material is now in private hands, like Bigelow Aerospace.
Yeah.
But they're, and I don't mean like it's in the hands of Uncle Harry or Aunt Lucy. It's all in the hands of private companies like Rand, Bigelow Aerospace, Lockheed. I'm leaving somebody out, but because they don't have to respond to FOIA requests. It's only the government that has to do that. Yeah. So it's all in private hands that way.
Have you heard about Nat Kobitz and Ross Coulthard's source? Do you know who Ross Coulthard is? The journalist from Australia?
No.
Okay. Well, Ross Coulthard is he worked at CBS 60 Minutes in Australia. So he's a big-time journalist in Australia, and a couple of years ago he got into UFO. So now he has dove into the UFO topic really seriously, and he sat down and wrote handwritten letters to people in America he thought could have inside information about crash materials, and he got an answer, and he got a really good source called Nat Kobitz. Nat Kobitz was the head scientist for the U.S. Navy. He had a really long career in the U.S. Navy as a chief scientist, and he told Ross Coulthard that he was read into a UFO crash retrieval or reverse engineering program. He's dead now. He was sick. I think he had cancer. He died a couple of years ago just. But he also told Ross that after he got his pension, he was invited in. Then he was in a private firm doing some sort of very advanced welding, some sort of micro level welding, very sophisticated. So he got invited to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in the cellars, and you know what they have down there. Yeah, so he got shown some sort of bulkhead, some sort of material that they were asking him as knowledge. He had a knowledge about this welding technology, so they were asking him if he could figure out how this material was made or how it was processed. And he said that material he had never seen such a material.
Where did you get is there anything written on this? Did you have anything you can send me on this? This is an interesting story.
Absolutely. It's in Ross Coulthard's book, In Plain Sight. It came out this summer.
And you're right, there is a lot of stuff underground at Wright-Patterson. I was never there, but Schmidt was there, and people that we've interviewed were there. They said it's obvious once you get on the base that there's a lot of stuff underground because they have these air vents coming up, you know. And we do have some testimony. We do have some testimony of people of what they saw when the bodies were there. They're not there anymore, but they were there for some years.
I haven't read your book on Wright-Patterson yet, but I'm gonna read it eventually.
People like that one. They like that one.
Is the story of Norma Gardner, is that in there?
Yeah, she's in there. June Crane. Yeah, and a lot of new witnesses, not just because those Norma Gardner goes back to the first Randall Schmidt book, UFO Crash at Roswell. She's in that book. And so we have her in there, but we also have June Crane and a couple of others who worked at Wright-Pat. And that was one of our best sellers. Came out in 2019. 2019, yeah.
I haven't read that one yet, but I'm definitely going to. So when I've read that one,
you won't be disappointed.
Yeah, is it a lot of Roswell entanglements in it, I guess.
Yes, a lot of Roswell entanglements, a lot of other stuff, and it was one of our best sellers.
Is there such a room or place called the Blue Room or Blue Lab?
The Blue Room, yes.
Blue Room, yeah.
Blue Room, yes. That's in there too.
The one Goldwater asked about, right?
Yes, yes. 1963. 1963, yes. No, that was the second. Our first Wright-Patterson book was 2013, called The Real Area 51. Inside the Real Area 51. That one did so well is that we did a sequel to it, UFO Secrets Inside Area 51, inside Wright-Patterson, The Real Area 51, in 2019.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Okay.